we did just make a hire recently, new safeties coach to replace Austin Armstrong. And I actually think this is really interesting. Vinnie Sunseri from Washington, or Jacksonville State, actually, the new DC, was the new DC for Jacksonville State. What I think is interesting here is, from what I've heard, Austin Armstrong didn't really spend too much time with the safeties. Because he was a DC, he was focusing more on the entire defense. Vinnie Sunseri obviously also has that co-DC tag. But from my understanding, he is going to be focused mainly on those safeties and not the entire defense, which I think is obviously a good deal for guys like Jordan Castell and Bryce, I keep saying his brother's name, Bryce Thornton, who can develop a good bit more now. Because we saw a lot of weaknesses from our safeties the past couple of years. We saw some good, obviously, which could be thanks to talent and a bit of coaching. But obviously, you give them more coaching, they're going to supposedly, in theory, get better than what they were.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is viewed through the lenses of adding a safeties coach. I think this is a fine hire. I mean, Washington, solid defensively, in the secondary too. Last year was a good, not a great Washington team, but actually pretty strong defensively in their move to the Big Ten. I mean, he's a young guy. He's only 33. This was his only year of college position coach experience. Was previously a running backs coach for the Patriots for 3 years. So yeah, I know, kind of a weird thing, but I mean, he was a safety in college at Alabama. His background, he also was a defensive assistant for the Patriots before that. So and I agree. I think there's been a lot of negativity around this hire online. And I mean, I understand the optics of hiring a co-DC with a really limited resume. I get it, but I think people are making a little bit too much about that. I mean, guys, a co-DC that doesn't call plays, that's a meaningless title for contract and framing things as promotion purposes. That's all that is. I mean, Austin Armstrong didn't call plays. It was Ron Roberts. Presumably it's going to be Ron Roberts again. I mean, I'm not saying Sunseri won't have any responsibilities in terms of overseeing the whole defense, but I wouldn't be wow, Florida hiring a defensive coordinator with 1 year of college position coach experience. That's not what this is.
You want to know how young it feels for Vinnie Sunseri to be? He got a pick 6 against Johnny Manziel in college.
Wow.
Which feels interesting.
That is crazy.
Yeah, 30. You talk about him as a recruiter. He is young, so I guess he probably is a good recruiter. That's how they usually the younger coaches end up being better recruiters. Can relate more. But you got into Washington having a good secondary defense. I have some numbers here. Opponent completion percentage. They held opponents to a 57.68% completion percentage, which was 24th in the country. An average pass yards per pass, 6, which is 8th in the country. Yards a game, 172.3, which was 6th in the country. Interceptions and sacks, not really. Interceptions can be kind of luck-based or defensive line-based.
Sure.
So can't really judge how good Vinnie could be based on those numbers. But I do think this is a pretty good hire. You talked about optics for the co-DC title. He very likely isn't calling plays. Probably Ron Roberts. But there's been a lot of talk with Ron Roberts. So who knows what's actually going on there behind the scenes. Maybe
he's out recruiting.
He is out recruiting. We also Rob Sale, right? Rob Sale. Yeah, Rob Sale. Okay. He got a new contract. That was actually a demotion for him. Interestingly enough, still O-line coach. Removed the co-OC title.
I missed that. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Must have been while I was out, but yeah, that's interesting. So it's just Russ Callaway as the full OC now.
I guess so. Maybe OC hire, play caller hired pending. I don't know.
I don't know about that at this point.
If
I don't think Ron's leaving,
and that's the thing I've been hearing. If he leaves, it's not based on his choosing. It's not if he does end up being away from the Florida program. But I feel like that also would have already happened by now.
I mean, there's a lot of, I don't want to get into it, but there's a lot of, I mean, if you read on Twitter for 5 seconds, you'll know kind of what we're referencing. There's a lot of like rumors surrounding him and kind of off field stuff. Look, all I'll say on that is this: I don't have any specific intel, but Billy promoted him to play caller midway through last season. Like, I don't think there's really discord there between him and Billy Napier. I don't get that impression. So
the only thing is I keep hearing a couple other names to be the DC. So that's why, like, I'm not necessarily what's going on with Ron, but I keep hearing a couple names that we might hire to be the new DC. So that's kind of where I'm left at. So I'm kind of let it play out. But just on the Vinnie hire alone, my thoughts, I like the hire. I think he's obviously fastly rising through the ranks. Went to be a safeties coach directly to be a defensive coordinator. Obviously, lower level job, but an upgrade in title. And I mean, only 33 years old. We do have seen Billy loves to go after younger coaches. I mean, we saw it with Patrick Toney, Austin Armstrong, now Vinnie. Who else on the staff is pretty young? I feel like there's a couple other guys.
I mean, Callaway's a young guy.
Callaway.
Yeah.
So we've seen it, and interesting. Another DB coach from Washington. Will Harris obviously spent a lot of time at Washington. So must be a connection there or something.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to the extent that I've seen frustration with this hire, I think it kind of stems from that Billy kind of continues to hire these younger up-and-coming guys, and they're like, we're Florida. Why aren't we throwing our weight around more to hire more proven guys? And I think that's a fair criticism. I mean, to be fair, they kind of did that with Ron Roberts. I mean, Ron Roberts, pretty well-traveled defensive guy, about as experienced as they come. I mean, he was literally Austin Armstrong was a Ron Roberts protege, like earlier in both of their careers. So, I mean, I just think too much is being made about the co-DC element of this. And I mean, we'll see. We'll see what kind of responsibility he has. That hasn't really been clarified yet. So maybe I'm wrong and he's actually going to get play calling duties. I don't think that's going to be the case. I mean, I think, again, as a safeties coach, it's a fine hire. You know, could you have gone out and gotten someone more experienced? Like, perhaps. I mean, I'm not sure. Like, I feel like Billy's less experienced staffing hires have not necessarily been the ones that have drawn the most criticism. I mean, I don't even agree with it, but Billy Gonzalez is the one that everyone seems to want fired. And Billy Gonzalez is like one of the most well-traveled receiving coaches in the country. I
mean, he's been with Florida for what, 15
3 different
years?
stints. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't get the Billy Gonzalez hire. He's producing receivers.
Yeah. I don't get it either.
How much you want to give him credit for the guys that we've recruited?
Yeah.
You can say there's also been talks to Chris Docrez, a lot of recruiting. But honestly, one thing that really surprised me about this Vinnie Sunseri hire, I don't see really any connections for him. Like, how do we get in contact? I mean, obviously we talked to agents and stuff, but how did Billy get to pick him as a safeties coach?
Billy, didn't he play at Alabama when Billy was there in 2013, 14?
Yeah.
Something like that area. Okay. That era. Yeah, I think
so that would
be my guess.
I was looking at as a coach because grad assistant in 2019 at Bama, Billy wasn't there. New England, he wasn't there. Obviously, Washington, no. So yeah, I guess he played for him. So that's where the connection is.
He played for Billy. His Billy was an analyst in 2011 there. So he would have played for him that year. And then Billy's first year as receivers coach was Sunseri's last year at Alabama. So he had 2 years working with Billy, probably not directly since Billy's an offensive guy, but yeah.
That would have a small connection. And with him rising up the ranks really quickly, obviously Billy would have an eye for it. But going back to what you were saying about the coaching hires and them being good, more of the the hires that didn't work out seem to be the more experienced ones. I mean, you remember when we hired Corey Raymond, that was a huge deal because he was the best DB coach in the country. I mean, our corners coach specifically, with what he did at LSU, Derek Stingley Jr. was coming off being the first round pick, and early on, it seemed like he was going to be one of the best corners in college football history. But, I mean, I think he also experienced some injuries, and that's 2020 stuff was weird. So, but still, Corey Raymond had been the guy that had been with LSU for over a decade. Yeah. And it was a really big surprise that Florida was able to poach him. Obviously, it seemed to do less good than we would have hoped. And I don't really think it's doing much good right now at LSU for Raymond.
They got DJ Pickett. I mean, he's
I mean,
recruiting. He's
I mean,
recruiting
recruiting,
better
though.
at now in his second return to
Yeah.
LSU than he ever was at Florida.
Yeah, but I'm specifically talking more about on-field products.
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously see Jakeem Jackson follow Corey back to LSU now. So like recruiting's been fine for Corey, but on field, I mean, Lagway. We beat him. We'll see what happens week 3 next season when we go to Death Valley again. But yeah, it seems like the younger hires have worked out a decent bit. I mean, Austin Armstrong. I don't know how you want to look at that. I think he was an example of someone who wasn't ready yet. I mean, to be at UF specifically, because now he's at Houston to call plays and everything. But overall, I do like this Vinnie hire, and I'm excited to see how it works out.
Yeah, I mean, again, as a safeties coach, that's fine. This guy was a Big Ten safeties coach last year for a defense that was successful. He's not the most proven, but I don't see any reason to think it's not an upgrade, especially because, and I'm curious if you have any insight here, because I was trying to figure this out. So, I mean, I've heard that Will Harris primarily works with corners, but he's listed, his title is secondary coach. I mean, so are you saying Armstrong, while technically being over safeties, didn't actually work with safeties? I've heard that Armstrong would work with safeties like in individual drills in practice.
So I don't know specifically about in practice. I mean, I know what I was told was Armstrong was very limited with how much he worked with the safeties compared to other position coaches that you compared to what you would expect from a position coach.
Yeah.
I'd be very shocked.
Just having a devoted safeties coach is a good thing now.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to point out earlier.
Yeah.
More time with the coach and everything to develop them. And as I was saying, I'd be shocked if Vinnie wasn't spending a lot more time with safeties than what Armstrong was.
Yeah.
Which, from a guy who was calling plays and running the defense, you get. But
until at least October of this year, because he lost play calling midway through the season, right? It wasn't Ron Roberts. Was it Ron Roberts the whole time this year? Because my understanding was they kind of switched it up throughout.
I've heard a lot of things, man. I don't know what the truth is.
Okay.
I mean, when you look at the Miami game, the play calling, was that really the biggest issue in that game? I mean,
I don't know if I would say
zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more execution than scheme in that game, I would say.
That's one thing I push back a lot of people. They look back through the years of Billy's